Welcome back to Flipping Rich. Today we're going to be talking about a win-win situation. A win-win situation. Actually, when you're talking to sellers or you're making offers, Pete, I mean, how do you feel about when you're talking to a seller, you're making an offer? I mean, do you just care about yourself? Do you care about other people? I mean, what is the concept of making it a win-win?
You know, I think in the end, this is what makes this business so difficult for people. Mm-hmm. It's how they perceive it. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of people perceive real estate, if you win, someone's got to lose. And that's not an environment most people want to exist in, right? Like think about it. If you're in a business where the only way you're going to make money is by hurting somebody, taking advantage of someone, ripping someone off, making sure that they lose, that's not a very good environment. And a lot of investors, that's what they think. They think this is a business where you got to take, and let's face it, it is like kind of a perceived notion that as an investor, to be successful, you have to make sure that somebody gets hurt, that you're taking advantage of someone.
That you're making the best deal and making the most money and with no regards to them. Yeah.
Right, and ripping somebody off in the process. And the reality of it is, that's just not what happens in this business. I mean, this is one of the businesses where literally, it could be a win-win scenario.
Well, let's talk about some examples, of a win-win scenario. I mean, I know we've got tons where we were able to, really like when I kind of think of it like almost like a tool belt, right?
Yep.
When I go into an appointment or I'm talking to a seller, actually to me, price is the last thing that I'm worried about when I go into a home. I want to get to know somebody and I want to know what their scenario is, because generally when someone's selling a home to an investor, it's for a reason, such as like you're in pre-foreclosure, or there's been a death, there's been a divorce, there's been a job move. I mean, sometimes people do just sell because they want to sell, right? But how do you go into a conversation and try to figure out what their problems are? Right? Like how much time do you take on that?
Well, I think you got to take whatever time is needed, because in the end, if it's not going to be a win-win scenario, like you're right, you have to identify, is there a chance for you to literally help somebody? Mm-hmm. Right? Let's say this. There's two types of sellers, let's say. One seller, they don't need to really sell. They don't have a timeline. Mm-hmm. They have no equity in the house. All right, and they're kind of, sort of, but not really motivated to move, okay? Mm-hmm. On the other hand, you have a seller that has been mandated by the court to sell their house. Mm-hmm. They have plenty of equity. Mm-hmm. They have a job they just found across the country, right? Well, it's going to be very hard for us to help that first individual, right? Mm-hmm. There's really just no opportunity there. Whereas on that second case, we could help that person all day long. Well, until you find out who you're dealing with, right, you're shooting yourself in the foot. And this is why I think, I keep on saying this is why people get discouraged in this business. They don't make the distinguish. They don't distinguish between the two, right? So
it's a person, not a house.
Well, there's no question about it. No question about it, and here it is. They're working with this person here, right? Mm-hmm. They're spending an inordinate amount of time with that person just to realize it could never be a deal. Mm-mm. Whereas I'm going to take the time, find the right people that I could help, focus my attention on there, and really I'm going to kind of create a much better atmosphere for myself.
Exactly. I mean, like in a lot of cases, let's talk about pre-foreclosure for a minute. If you will you just explain what a pre-foreclosure is?
Sure. So if you have a mortgage on your house, then obviously that you owe some money. Somebody basically lends you their money to buy your house. But in turn, you have to pay that money back. You have your monthly mortgage payments. Well, let's face it, some people, for whatever reason, can't make those mortgage payments. By the way, they're not bad people.
No, it's the house's fault. That's what I always say.
Well,
it's the house's fault.
Somebody created that situation.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people find, listen, we just came out of a pandemic where a lot of people were put in positions they couldn't even imagine before it started. So what happens in a pre-foreclosure scenario, the owner of the house, the person living in that house that's who's borrowed the money, it basically finds themselves in a financial situation where they can no longer make the mortgage payments. And what happens once you go past a certain point, the mortgage company could basically initiate actions to take that house away from you. And when those actions start happening, you find yourself in what is known as a pre-foreclosure state, or basically you're in trouble. You're in trouble. You could lose that house. You could lose the equity in the house. You could lose the credit you have. You could encounter a lawsuit. You could put yourself in and this is the other thing. And you know this, it's those people find themselves not only in trouble with this particular house, but they many times can prevent themselves from buying another house.
For like 7 years.
Exactly. Even renting.
Even renting. You're exactly right. So, you know, understanding when someone, how do you make a situation like that a win-win? You know, like even on my first initial call, I talk about a win-win scenario. Like I say, you know, listen, it's my goal to make this a win-win for both you and I. In a pre-foreclosure situation, my saying might be, my goal is to buy your home prior to you losing it back to the bank, right? And hopefully be able to put a little bit of money back into your pocket so you're able to move on, I mean, just to the next stage of your life, right? So I would consider that a win-win. But let's talk about scenarios. So as over the last few months, I mean, we've probably closed on 15 pre-foreclosures, right? What are some ways when you're walking in there that you can help somebody in pre-foreclosure?
Well, the first thing is, remember, for it to be a win-win, everybody has to understand what's going on, right? And a lot of times in scenarios, people do understand what's going on. Like, you know, you got a sickness. Okay, I got it. I got to get out. You know, you have a job move. Okay, I got it. I got to move. A lot of times in pre-foreclosures, people don't quite understand what's going to take place, what is taking place, and they kind of numb themselves to the situation.
Yeah, they stick their head in the sand.
They blind themselves with this whole thing. So many times you have to educate people. You have to educate people on exactly what's taking place. Many times you kind of have to go over the consequences. You know, you have to explain to them what the consequences is, and you have to offer them a viable solution. And a viable solution, although does require many times them moving, there's a lot of positive that can happen out of this scenario, right? We could save their credit, right? We could save a potential lawsuit. We could put money in their pocket, right? We could create a win-win situation by finding another or helping them find another place to win. So I think the key to these win-win scenarios is you really, really have to make sure, especially in a scenario like pre-foreclosure, which, by the way, at least hopefully, many people find themselves in only one time in their life, right? And anytime you go through something for the first time or the only time, you really don't know what's going on.
And it's not like you really want to talk to people about it anyway. I mean, it's embarrassing. You know, so it's not like you're talking to your buddies about, hey, I'm fixing to lose my house. You know what I mean? So being there to communicate, being educated on what the processes are.
And think about this. Who do they have on the other side? The big bank, right? And the bank is going to help them. Well, they're not helping them, right?
No.
What are they doing? They're sending threatening letters. They're getting attorneys involved, and
charging ridiculous fees.
They're hitting you with
interest.
Fees. They're hitting you with interest rate. They're hitting you, you know, with what happens when they accelerate and what happens with interest rates and all the stuff like that. They're having attorneys call you, and let's face it, attorneys never call you. You know, so you have on one hand this incredible amount of pressure, and so really you're to a certain degree, and you know, I don't know if this is true, but you can become their confidant, don't they?
Yeah. I mean, I would definitely say so. I mean, the house we're dealing with right now, we've bought it, we've already got it resold. Right, we're taking it down, but we're selling it as is. The one that Ed's doing up in is it Maryland or West Virginia? I can't remember which. No, it's West Virginia.
Okay.
So we pulled it out of foreclosure one time. It was set for auction this month. The lady, she just is having a really hard time understanding that, like, seriously, we've got to move on this. Like, you are about to lose your house. And then not to mention, she has some equity in there. And the equity's getting eaten and eaten and eaten by all this time. So, number one, that when we went to the house the first time, and this is a crazy story, y'all. We went to the house the first time, and we put it under contract. We knew we could help her get her out as quickly as we can. Well, obviously, we do an inspection because we were going to buy, fix, and sell the house. We send the inspector out there. Guess what the inspector did?
What?
Walks in the front door, closes the door, looks back at Ed and says, I'm not inspecting this house until you clean it up. Because she kind of, I don't know, it was, she has a lot of stuff, kind of like a hoarding situation, So we hadn't even done the deal yet. We paid somebody to come clean her house up.
Okay.
Cost $3,000 to clean the trash out of there, just so we could get it inspected. Now, that's not normally something you would do, is put money on something before you buy it. I actually do not recommend that. But this lady was, older. I mean, and we didn't want her losing her house and being put on the street. So we did that. We had all the necessary inspections. We're heading to close, and she literally just keeps hemming and hawing around every corner. Because why? She didn't have nowhere to move to. So what happened? We were working with a realtor. I think it's Matt, the realtor, and Ed worked together. So they've been searching this whole. Oh, and by the way, she has like 20-something cats. So nowhere's going to let you rent with that many cats. So this whole time, we've been trying to get these cats adopted, plus find her a place to live, right? And I think we're closing, in 2 weeks now?
And we got a place to live.
You talked to Matt. He's putting her in one of his places.
I said that's a win-win.
It is a win-win.
All right.
I mean, it is a win-win. I mean, and that's not a normal scenario, but that's finding solutions for somebody, because she lived there for so long and it's just so emotional for her. And I know personally, going through bankruptcy, losing everything, I just didn't want to face reality. And it's just like, if you put it off, and you don't look at it, it's not there, kind of thing. But we try our best to really make it a win-win. But the point is, Pete, yes, it's more work, but is it worth it?
Yeah, you better believe it. I mean, obviously on the financial side, it's worth it. But it is, like you said, it's we're talking about win-win. It's worth it at the people level too. I know we've kind of stayed focused a little bit on the pre-foreclosures, but I'd say pretty much as an investor, every scenario we go into, we're helping someone. Because let's face it, nobody just wakes up one day and says, "Hey, I got a house that's worth $500,000. Let me just sell it for $200,000." I'm sure that's happened, but that doesn't really happen. Almost all the time when somebody leaves money on the table or creates equity in the deal, there's something going on behind the scenes.
Oh yeah, that needs to be taken care of.
There's always something going on behind the scenes, and it could be. We mentioned it could be a potential divorce decree that's forcing somebody to sell. It could be a job move, and there is no, job ain't gonna wait, right? If they say show up and your starting date is in 2 weeks, they ain't waiting. They're not pushing off their that.
I mean, there's all kind of scenarios. I remember that one lady in Gainesville, and she was almost 80. And she had an adult son with disabilities, okay? Her husband had died. The house was beautiful house. Big yard, flower beds everywhere. Her reason to sell, which you wouldn't think of it, is that she couldn't list the house. Okay. Because of her son with disabilities. I believe he had serious autism. Okay. So he couldn't handle, her son could not handle people coming in there. Okay. Coming into a space, doing viewings. She had gotten to an age where the house is just too much for her to take care of.
Okay, I do remember this now.
You remember?
Yeah.
And so what did we do? Well, the house was too big for her to take care of. She was starting to get, physically a little bit more ill. I literally drove her around Gainesville, met with other realtors to find her an assisted living place that would take her and her son. And that was big enough to take all of them, but that's she didn't even know who to turn to. Right. She actually called us off of a sign Remember that day we put out those "We Buy Houses" signs?
I do remember that.
She called us off of a sign because she was there. Her family, she had other kids, but they didn't live in Georgia anymore. And for me, and you remember deals like that, right? You're always going to remember making money, okay? Well, you do and you don't. But when you make it a win-win for both you and them, those are the memories that you won't forget. I mean, we've done like well over 3,000 deals together. And it's like you remember some of these, and it's because of the people. I love this business because, yes, I can make good money, but I love people, and I know you do too. So making it a win-win and helping somebody while helping yourself literally could be a reason why you want to get in this business, because there's not very many businesses that you can make the type of money that you can make doing this. It's not easy, don't get me wrong. And have the ability to help others and learn new things, right? I mean, what are some of your most memorable deals? Did it not have to do with the people that were involved?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because there's usually two things involved, right? There's usually two things involved. There's usually that motivation, which is why what you said is so true. Take whatever time you got to figure out to figure out if you could help someone. But the second thing is there's almost always a timeline. There's almost always a timeline. So when you're talking about memorable, I'll tell you about one we got going on right now that we just closed a couple days ago. So we had this deal under contract with one of our partners. And Mary's our closer, for those of you that don't follow us. Mary's been with us forever. She closes all our deals. She closes all our partner deals across the United States. She's absolutely amazing. And so I get a call from Mary 2 weeks ago. Now, when we're doing real estate transactions, we try not to make 2-week transactions. We try to get a 2 to 3 week inspection period, then we try to do another 2 to 3. So it's not uncommon to close somewhere within 30 to 45 days. And all of a sudden I get a call. We get a property that goes under contract. I get a call from Mary a couple weeks ago. She says, "Pete, this property has to close in 2 weeks." And it was a big one. We just bought it. I think we paid like $400,000 for it. So it's not a small little house. Okay?
No, it's not $100,000 house where it'll sell.
Well, and that's
easy.
exactly right. The bigger you get into the deal, the more things that could go wrong, including on the sales side. So we got a call, talking about memorable. We get a call a couple weeks ago. I get a call from our closer. Mary says, "Pete, we got to close on this thing all of a sudden." And what happened is, a timeline had developed for the seller. Whereas the seller had X amount of time, then all of a sudden a seller had a very small period of time. And again, this is so cool about being in a business like ours. If you think about it, let's say they were selling this retail, homeowner to homeowner, right? Good luck.
Well, you're not going to get the mortgage company like, "Hey, I got to close in 2 weeks." It's not going to happen.
It's impossible.
Yeah.
It's impossible. And, I'll tell you, one of the thing that makes this whole business across the board to me memorable, exciting, fulfilling is that literally that timeline went from we got time to literally we have no time, because in 2 weeks is literally no time in real estate. And just 2 or 3 days ago, we were able to fulfill on that promise of us being able to help that family, close it out, and the needs that they had in the back end, we were able to fulfill and meet them. By the way, this happens all the time. This happens all the time.
Like every week now.
Yeah, whether it's a shorter timeline or whether it's like finding a place for someone to stay and live. Or whether it's saving their credit or saving their dignity from embarrassing situations. I would say across the board, pretty much every single deal we do has a win-win in it and has tremendous, tremendous gratification on the back end.
Yeah, absolutely. And what advice would you have to tell somebody when going on an appointment, maybe their first one or maybe even redoing what they're doing now? What do you think is the most important thing that somebody could do to make it a win-win?
Well, I think the key is exactly what you said when we started. You have to find out what the situation is. Too many people go in blind into this business. And what I mean blind is they don't care who the seller is. They don't care what the situation is. They're going to try to bully their way through this. And I think that's very difficult. And I think that's very painstaking. And I think in the end, that becomes very discouraging. And I think that's where, in the end, people quit this business. So the best advice I can give to somebody is understanding we are not a solution for every single person that wants to sell a property. And I know it's hard for some people to hear. To me, that's just, there's no solution for any industry for anything, right? Just like there's different doctors, there's different scenarios and all this. So we are not a solution for everybody, but we are a tremendous solution for a good segment in this industry. So the best kind of advice I could give to somebody is figure that out.
Yeah.
Figure that out ahead of time, or figure out as quickly as you can in the process, are we able to help somebody? Because I could tell you this, the dynamics of the deal change immediately. When you went from trying to kind of figure out if you could get a deal done to realizing that you can help somebody, the dynamics change very quickly. And all of a sudden, something that becomes adversarial goes from an adversarial to kind of sort of like, hey, we're on the same team. Let's see how we can make this thing work.
Absolutely.
Figure that out ahead of time.
Absolutely. Great advice, Pete. Great advice. Well, thank you for joining us on another episode of Flipping Rich.